Hello, and welcome to another episode of the Phoenix Wisdom Podcast. I am your host, Janet Sandberg, and today I am joined by Pamela Topjian. Welcome, Pamela. I'm so happy to have you here today, sharing your story with us. Tell us a little bit about yourself.
So I am a former nurse turned hypnotherapist turned pet sitter. I am a survivor of childhood trauma, poverty, sexual assault, date rapes, and the trauma lasted into my adulthood. I've had 2 abusive marriages, and I had a severe mental breakdown at the end of the second marriage. And from that, during that mental breakdown, I was very fearful, very anxious. I was suicidal and came out of that. Thank you very much. Was able to heal from that. And now my life is so much better than I ever could have expected. So I think it's really important to hear those stories of people, because when you're in that place, you don't think that you can't imagine that you'll ever even be able to live to tell about it or even exist in a normal way. But my life is so much better than I ever thought was even possible. So when I'm an author, I wrote a memoir all about that whole experience. And I wrote another book about my experience behind the scenes of nursing and why I left the field.
Awesome. Yeah, we'll have to.
That's a lot.
Yeah, we'll put a link in the description to
Thank you.
your books and all the rest of your stuff. So yeah, let's hear the whole story.
Yeah.
What was going on? I mean, you mentioned a lot of things that kind of like leading up to that. Like you went through a lot. It's no
Yeah.
wonder that you had a breakdown, like any human being would by the sounds of it. But
Yeah.
tell us a little bit more about what led you to feeling absolutely hopeless.
Yeah, so it's kind of funny because in my childhood, as I mentioned, was traumatic. We lived in poverty. We moved a lot. We were evicted some of the times. We were hungry most of the times. I had a sister that was killed in a car accident when I was a young teen. I was just turning 14. And all of that stuff, I didn't ever think of it as being traumatic, or I just was like, we were poor and my sister died, and it's just like
That was just
that's
your
all.
life. Yeah, you
That
had
was just
no
my
other
life.
reference points as a
Right.
kid.
And my father wasn't around in my life, and this was the 70s, and so my mother was trying to raise up 3 children on her own as a woman in the 70s without any help financially or physically or in any way from my dad. So she was never around because she was working all the time, and it still wasn't enough. So I mentioned 2 abusive marriages. So after the second marriage, I divorced him. And when I divorced him, I thought everything will be great now. This is great. Now I'm on my own. I don't have to worry about men, or I didn't even, the whole childhood thing still was not really coming up. But I had this huge mental breakdown. Like I could barely function at times. I was very depressed, very fearful all the time, and I didn't understand where all that was coming from. So, then I ended up, so most people say that they didn't end up taking their own life because of their children. So my children are adults, and they were adults at that time. But because of the loss of my sister, I didn't want to do that to my mother. I didn't want my mother to lose another child.
Yeah.
So that was what kind of helped me to hold on, because I was very close. I had a plan, like not necessarily a plan on this date, this time, but I knew ways that I could get that done if I couldn't come out of that. So as it happened, then I was away from the second husband, away from the husbands, on my own, had this mental breakdown. And so a friend who was also going through similar situation was going to move. So we lived in Missouri. They were going to move out to California, where I am now, and just to get a fresh start. And it's like, maybe you want to do that, get far away, because I was kind of fearful of not knowing if my ex-husband would know where I was or find me. And I thought that might be part of what the fear came from. So we moved. So I got on a bus, a one-way ticket at age 50 and came out to California.
Wow.
My friend never did come, but I did. So I had told my landlord that, I forgot about this part. So I told my landlord that I may have to break the lease. I may be moving out of state. And I wasn't sure yet because I didn't have everything figured out. But it was suggested to me and it sounded like it might be a good idea. And when I talked to the landlord, they said, can you be out in 2 weeks? We're going to sell the house anyway. Because it was just a small little 2-bedroom house.
Okay.
Yeah. And I was like, I guess I'm doing this. Yeah. So I said, I'll try. And I was able to do it. So I did that. And I took jobs that were like live-in caretaker jobs, pet sitting, house sitting, caregiving, those kinds of things where I can live in. Because I didn't know if I was going to stay there. I didn't know if I was going to continue nursing. And in nursing, when you move state to state, you have to renew your license in the state that you're in. So you can't just go get a nursing job. But I was still in such a state of mind that I wouldn't have been able to do that anyway. Wouldn't have been able to work, in a traditional sense. So I came out here and did those kinds of jobs, and I got some therapy. I couldn't sleep. I was still feeling the same way I was. Highly anxious, very depressed. I wouldn't say that I was suicidal at that point because I had a little bit of hope. I was like, okay, maybe this will be a new start for me. Let's see what happens. Let's see what it brings. So I'd kind of let go of the plan. And also I was taking care of people's homes and pets and things and doing some caregiving. So I had people that relied on me. So then when I went to therapy, that's when I knew it was just about 3 sessions in or so. I knew that I was going to be okay. And it was just like the light at the end of the tunnel and the sun shining in your face for the first time. It's like, oh my gosh, it's going to be okay. I will get better. It's possible to get better. And I was just so relieved and excited about that. And from there, a year of therapy, I did go ahead and start my nursing again. I would say it was just a couple years and I was starting to feel depressed and anxious again. So a couple years in nursing, and this doesn't have to do with anything other than just, how come I'm not nursing now, is it was already feeling like, I say that it was a soul-sucking career for me, It just was, I don't want to get political or anything, but the whole system is, in my experience, it was corrupt. And I just felt like I wasn't doing any good. I felt like it was unethical and bosses were trying to have me do things that were against my license as well. So I only started nursing up again for the independence and to make some good money,
Sure.
And so when the pandemic hit and we had the lockdown, so I'm remarried. And the thing is, without that therapy, I would not have had the relationship that I have now. So I wanted to make sure to say that it wasn't just like, oh, I'll try again.
Right.
It's a
Right
completely
back
different
into
type of
repeating the same
person.
mistakes over again.
Right. And that's very important to know. So luckily, my husband had a job that he could work from home, and the financial thing wasn't as much of a problem or an issue that I had to be concerned with. And so that was a good time to sort of let the license lapse, because in 2021, it was going to be where I had to renew it again.
Right.
Because it's every 2 years or something. And I had taken some courses in hypnotherapy in 2010. And so now it was almost 10 years later. And so I was like, oh, I'm going to go back to that. And that's what I did. And I was doing pet sitting on the side. And the hypnotherapy kind of was up and down, but the pet sitting just kept growing and growing and growing. And that's what I'm doing today. And that's my story.
That's awesome. What do you think, like, obviously just sort of everything led to that breakdown and feeling suicidal? Was it just everything? Was there like a trigger, like one thing in particular, the straw that broke the camel's back kind of a thing?
Yes, I think that, and I failed to mention that in therapy as well, the therapist started asking me about my childhood, and we started talking about my childhood, and that only then is when I realized that it was, I had a traumatic childhood, that I was neglected, that, it was, part of CPTSD, in my life. So then we worked on that a lot. But I think that the breakdown was, okay, now I don't have to hold it together for my second husband was an alcoholic. He was abusing his medications and, it was just he was abusive in every way. And it just got worse and worse and worse and worse. And the day that I left was because he had beat me up and I was unconscious in the closet and he wouldn't let me leave. So I had to call the police to get out alive. And I slept on a friend's couch for two nights before I was able to get into that house that I rented. So that was kind of the straw, being in that closet and him not letting me leave.
Yeah.
And
Absolutely traumatic.
yeah. And then so I really think that it was, that was the straw, but then that brought up everything else, but I didn't realize it until I went through therapy. I didn't realize that all of that had really had an impact on me, that I had stuffed it down so much, but I think it was because I didn't have to be the responsible one for him, because he was in and out of recovery centers and psychiatric hospitals and that. And at first I thought that he had either like early onset Alzheimer's or late onset schizophrenia. Like, I was like, what's going on with him? I didn't know that he was drinking and abusing his medications. And so it was like such a shock to my system, and just working so hard at trying to get him well and the help he needed when he was self-sabotaging and everything, So that just all came crashing down at once. That's what happened.
Yeah. You step away, like when you're in all of that chaos all the time and constantly, from childhood through adulthood, right?
Right.
Like it was just one thing after another. You're just in survival mode constantly. And then it ends.
Yeah.
And you can breathe for a second and you're not surrounded by chaos. And then, it just all comes.
Exactly.
Up,
and your body says, okay. Yeah.
Comes at you from every direction.
He would go into a hospital or a treatment center and I would say to myself, because I was so busy, I was nursing doing 12, 16-hour shifts. And I was on an Alzheimer's unit. And so it was really stressful.
Yeah.
And so I used to say, and then I would have to be, sort of managing his recovery and stuff. And I used to say, when is my turn to have a breakdown? When do I get to break down? Well, I got my wish, right?
You were asking for it.
So the universe listened and said, okay, now you can have your breakdown. Now it's
your turn. Now it's your turn. Here you go.
Right. Yeah.
Wow. Yeah. And sometimes it's just like that.
Yeah.
But I love, that your point that it can be, all consuming when we're in that place. And there's just, you can't even imagine, as hard as you try, that things could ever get better.
Yeah. The way I feel now in my marriage and in my life in general, I couldn't have imagined this. I don't do anything that, one of the things about stepping away from hypnotherapy was at the beginning of this year is like, what is causing me the most stress in my life? And I had to take a step back, and then it's like, okay, and what are we going to do about that? Yeah. And it was just a constant, like when you're an entrepreneur and you're trying to get a business running and you're just one person.
Yep.
And that's not really my strong point, as far as, I feel perfectly confident in my hypnotherapy skills, but it's the running of the business that was so stressful and so hard. And I already had this other thing, and I'm near 60. So I had this other thing that I loved and was very busy at, and it was just growing and growing, kind of taking, the hypnotherapy certification needs to be renewed at the end of this year. So I'm kind of taking this year to decide, am I going to do something with this or, but that's where I'm at right now with it. But yeah.
And sometimes I think that's a really good thing to do, is just take a step back and be like, what are the things in my life that I don't like, that are causing me stress, that are making me feel overwhelmed, that are making me unhappy, and what can I do to change them? Because everything is in our power.
Yeah.
To more of a degree than others.
Yeah.
But you
Or
can,
your response to it,
yeah.
is within your power, how you
And
respond to
things
things
don't
and react.
necessarily have to change overnight either, right? Like
Right.
you can look back and be like, oh, my job is really very stressful. I'm not
Yeah.
thriving, so then you can start putting feelers out and just knowing
Yeah.
that you're taking those little steps towards doing something better for yourself
Yeah.
and getting yourself
Yeah.
into a better place.
And often those first steps are just a change in mindset, just
Mhm.
knowing that you don't have to stay where you are, whether it's a relationship, a job, a physical location, and even if you don't know how it's going to happen, just changing your mindset to know that it can happen, that this
Mhm.
doesn't have to be your life or whatever part of your life isn't working. Even if you don't see a different way or another way out, it doesn't mean that it's not possible, even if you can't see that right at that moment. But just taking stock and having, reflecting on it, and then, okay, this is something I need to figure out or work on changing, or just even making little steps of start looking into things,
Mhm.
like you said, putting feelers out, or, letting the universe know that, hey, this isn't where I want to be. So show me
Yeah.
something different.
Yeah. We don't all have to hop on a bus and move to a different state
Right, right.
within 2 weeks notice,
Oh my goodness. Oh my goodness. Yeah.
but then that's also like when an opportunity comes up like that to change
Hmm.
your whole life, like why not take it?
Yeah, yeah.
You
And
know?
a lot of people say, "Oh, you were so brave," or took a lot of courage. It's like, you know what? I was numb. I didn't care. I was ready to take my own life. Like I wasn't concerned for my safety. I wasn't concerned about, whether I was going to even make it there.
Yeah. It
I
can't
was
get any worse than this, so why not?
right.
Yeah.
Right. I was totally numb. I didn't have any of those feelings. So looking back, I can't believe I did it, but I'm very happy I did. So
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. And I was going to say something. What was it? It was something about, when we're making that list of like all the things we could change. I know
Mm-hmm.
for me, and it still happens sometimes, but
Yeah.
you think, oh, I could change this, but then you get all of those negative thoughts that come in, but this isn't going to work because this.
Right.
And you
But
just
yeah.
like discourage yourself
Mm-hmm.
right out of the gate.
Yeah.
And so then you don't do anything, but it's trying to stop all of those negative thoughts and the
Right.
buts and just entertain the idea. Like,
Right.
what if?
Allow yourself to daydream a little bit.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Like you said,
You don't
what
have to have
if?
it all figured out and know how you're going to get from A to B. Just let
Right.
yourself dream about it and be like, wouldn't it be
Yeah.
great if,
Yeah.
whatever.
Right. And I think that's like a prayer. That's like an intention, putting it out there, just being able to entertain the idea. And, talking about not knowing, what is that quote about, you don't have to know the full, you don't have to see what is it? The
The
full
full
staircase to
staircase to
take the
take the
first
first step.
step. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. It's so true.
Yeah. Yeah. So, what advice would you give to somebody who is in that place right now where they're hopeless and they're numb and they can't see a way out of where they are?
Yeah, so I would say, so one of the things that helped me, I would say write it all out, because you'll be surprised you think you've got it all in your head, but when you write it out, you'll be surprised at what comes out. And you'll be surprised at the feeling of a little bit more lighter. You're not as heavy holding all that inside you. If
Mm-hmm.
you write it all out, regardless of whether you're going to publish or not, but just write it all out and get it out of you. I think that's so important, and it's so helpful to sort of gain some clarity and some perspective and connect those dots of what got me here to where I am now in this place that I feel stuck. What happened in my life before this moment to get me to where I am now? I think that's so important. And also listening to stories, like on your podcast, and there's others as well. There's, books like mine and many others
Mm-hmm.
of people who have made it out of those places and gone on to not only just live their life, but to thrive and to love their life. So, seek out those stories, whether it's podcasts or books or anything, and listen to them. And it'll help you get the mindset to know that it is possible and you might be able to gain some hope. Also, therapy is so important. And so many people say, oh, I tried therapy or I tried counseling, it didn't work. But there's so many different kinds of therapies and ways that, you can find help. Just because that one counselor or that one therapist didn't work for you, doesn't mean that you're out of luck.
Mhm.
There's so many others. So yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. It's like going on 2 dates, and being like,
Right.
I guess I'll never find my person, Like
Right. Right.
finding a therapist is a lot like dating. Like you have to sometimes try a few
Right.
before you find somebody who you really click with, who you understands what you're
Absolutely.
saying, who gets you, who, and gives you the kind of feedback, like sometimes therapists just listen and
Right.
you go in, you vent for your 45 minutes or whatever and you
Mm-hmm.
leave and then that's it. They're just there to listen.
Yeah.
Others, sometimes you want to go in and you want somebody who's going to give you constructive feedback or who's going
Right.
to, help you connect the dots or
Yeah.
give you coping skills and homework to take home
Right.
with you. So there's
Yeah.
so many different types of therapy and types of therapists. Like definitely
Right.
don't give up after,
Right.
one or
Right.
two
Right.
misses.
Hold on to hope. Don't give up. Find,
Yeah.
it takes patience and it takes diligence, but
Mhm.
yeah, but there is a light at the end of the tunnel. I promise you there is, so
Yeah.
just listen to stories like mine and like others that are on your podcast. Yeah.
During the pandemic, I couldn't see my regular therapist, so I had to find a new one, online,
Mm-hmm.
of course, and she was wonderful. But we ended up needing 2 full sessions for intake.
Mm.
And so I get through the end of the second intake session, and she just like sits back and she's like, "That's a lot." For a therapist to come back and look at you and be like, "That's a lot." Yeah. I'm like, "Okay." And here, like you said, it's just your life. So you don't really
Right.
realize that other people's
Yeah.
lives are not, or you do, but it doesn't really sink in because you're just living it. But for
Yeah.
somebody who's heard a lot of stories,
Mm-hmm.
and I was like, "Oh, okay. I'm not broken. There's nothing wrong with me. I've just been through a lot.
Yeah.
And it's normal for me to feel this way and
Right.
react this way. Like, this is just being human and being a human
Yeah.
being who's been through a lot of stuff,
Yeah.
And
Yeah. I
then
remember
sometimes we
thinking,
just need that perspective.
yeah. Yeah, I remember thinking, "What's wrong with me? Everything should
Mhm.
be great now," and you don't realize, like you said, yeah. So it's like, "Oh, okay, maybe therapy will help." Maybe it validates you being there when the
Yeah.
therapist is like, "Oh, that's a lot,"
Yeah.
then it's like, "Oh, okay, then maybe I should be here."
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
And here's how you can do better. Knowing now that I know what you've been through, and I can understand why
Right.
you think the way you do, why you react the way you do, why are the way you are.
Yeah.
Here's
Right, right.
some strategies to get past that.
Mhm.
And yeah,
Yeah.
it's helpful.
Very, very. And some people might need that person that they can vent to, and that's all they need, and that's going to help. And other people might need somebody that's going to be more interactive with you and give you homework and everything. So everybody's different, and what you need might be different than what I need, and what I need might be different than what, my friend needs. So, that's why it kind of takes patience and diligence because you don't really know that until you go in.
Yeah,
Like, is this how this therapist or counselor works? Is that going to work for me? And I think too that people sometimes feel bad about saying, I'm going to look for another therapist. But a good therapist will really want you to get the best help for you.
absolutely.
And they
Yes,
will want you to find what's going to work best for you. So they don't take it personally. And if they do, then they're not really in the business of trying to help you.
exactly. Exactly.
Yeah.
So I do Reiki, which is
Oh,
an
okay.
energy healing modality. And that's what I always
Yeah.
said. Like, I don't want you to see me forever. Like it's great for
Yeah.
my bank account if I would see everybody once a week for the rest of their lives. But
Right.
I want you to feel better. I want you to heal. I
Right.
want you to not need me anymore. Like to still want to
Right.
come
Right.
because it feels good and it's relaxing and it's awesome. That's one thing. But
Right.
if you're in chronic pain or whatever, you have a lot of anxiety and you start feeling
Mhm.
better and you don't need to see me as often. Thank you.
Yeah, right,
Go off
right.
and live
Then
your
what I
life.
did helped you. Yeah, yeah. Then you really did assist in their healing. Yeah.
Yeah. So, anyways, thank you so much for being here today and for sharing your story and your inspiration with all of us who are
Yeah, thank
here
you.
and listening. I really appreciate you and your time. Thank you for listening. Remember that you are loved, you are worthy, you are valuable, you are meant for more, and that it really does get better. If you are in crisis, there are numbers that you can call or text to get the help that you need. That information for Canada and the US is in the description below each episode. If you are in immediate crisis, please call 911. We love you, and I hope you'll listen again.